You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is Stephen Hunter. Thanks for tuning in to Author Stories today. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you. Before we get into that, I'd like to tell you about some sponsors today. Crystal Pico Watanabe at Pico's House. The Pico's House website now has a new look. She's got a team of 8 people who help provide services to fiction authors. She has a full slate of services that now include beta reading. She's got 4 beta readers now. So if you're looking for beta reading services, she can definitely take on your project. Manuscript critique, developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. Authors can also inquire about putting their books in her Book Lovers Box, which is a monthly digital subscription box with a different theme each month. It's free to authors for a limited time. Be sure to check out Crystal and her whole team at Pico's House. That's PIKKOSHOUSE.com. Thanks, Crystal, for sponsoring the show. While cape and spandex movies are breaking box office records, comic book commentator and influencer Ed Gosney doesn't want us to forget the roots of these marvelous wonders. His blog, Cool Comics in My Collection at edgosney.com, covers the gamut of 4-color entertainment, from contemporary comic books to comics made for kids to bargain bin gold to classics that will transport you back in time. Comic books are a perfect blend of art and story, and Cool Comics captures the essence of what these funny books mean to us in a personal way. And make sure to join the Cool Comics in My Collection Facebook group, where members can interact, show off their prized comics, and have opportunities to win. You guessed it, Cool Comics. Published weekly, Cool Comics in My Collection aims to bring you a smile and reminds us why comic books are fun. Be sure to visit edgosney.com today. Speaking of superheroes and comics, my friend Patricia Gilliam has a fantastic series called The Heroes of Corvus. It begins with Book 1, a flight between a second-generation superhero named Red Bolt and a villain for hire named Icarus goes terribly wrong, resulting in the drowning deaths of 3 innocent civilians and orphaning a 6-year-old boy. Racked with guilt, Red Bolt visits Cameron Wilson at the hospital every night and won't leave the boy's side until he falls asleep. Befriended by a night shift nurse, the man in costume begins to disclose what really happened after the fight and why he feels the deaths of Cameron's parents and sister fall on his actions. A superhero didn't survive that night, and Cameron and the rest of the city aren't out of danger. This is such a phenomenal story. She has released up to part 4 now, and I cannot wait for part 5 to come out. If you're looking for a great adventure read that's on the cutting edge of what is in today's entertainment, The Heroes of Corvus is the series for you by Patricia Gilliam. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to go to hankgarner.com to subscribe to the show. We're on just about every platform you can imagine. Now stay tuned for our show. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Stephen Hunter on the show with me today. He has a fantastic new book, the 11th installment of the Bob Lee Swagger series, and it's called Game of Snipers. And if you're a fan of this series or thrillers in general, this is going to be a must-have for your bookshelf. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you, Hank. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. We begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
When I was a very young child, like everyone who became a writer, I was a voracious reader. A reader, I don't know where that came from. A voracious reader, and I fell under the spell of a writer named R. Stanley Bowen. He wrote boys' adventure novels set in World War II aviation. He wrote Red Randall at Pearl Harbor. He wrote Dave Dawson in the Royal Air Force. All his characters had first and last names beginning with the same letter. And I just love those books. I can't tell you and to some degree, I'm still imitating him. I'm still trying to become R. Stanley Bowen. What I do remember is going to my mother and bullying her into taking dictation, and she was a very strong typist. So I dictated a story to her, a Dave Dawson story, and in the first paragraph, Dave shot down 7 Messerschmitts. And it would be 10 years before I figured out maybe it would be a little bit better to spread the Messerschmitts out. You know, they wouldn't all have to be in the first paragraph. And now, 20-odd books and 60-odd years later, I still don't think I've got the right ratio of Messerschmitts to pages. I just don't think I've brought it off. I'm still lagging behind R. Stanley Bowen. But that was my first, that was the first time stories so moved me that I wanted to do them.
Well, having that realization at such a young age is something that a lot of writers still struggle with. At least you're still struggling with it, which means you're still working the craft, and some people never realize the shortcomings of their writing.
No, that's very true, and I tell myself as a necessary corrective every day. I tell myself that I am just as capable of writing garbage as I was at any day in my life previous. And I have to I've got to get my garbage alert going and make sure that it doesn't happen, or that when it happens, I get rid of it. So I am aware of my faults. I could list them if you wanted, but maybe not. But I know what I do well, and I know what I do poorly. And I think that one thing anyone who aspires to be a professional in this business has got to do is face the reality of their talent and understand that they're not going to be universally great. They can't do everything. They're going to be drawn to certain areas, and even within those areas, they're going to be able to do certain things much better than other things, and that they ought to therefore construct their books in ways, or their stories in ways, to show off what they do well and hide what they do poorly.
That's a great observation, that to find out what your strong suit's on and build on those, and that's fantastic advice. Stephen, other than your mother who did dictation for you, which was an amazing gift for an adult to give a child. That's the kind of real encouragement that is lasting. Were there any teachers? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say she got bored after the first paragraph and went away. But the first graph was very important.
Exactly.
Now, you're going to ask about teachers.
Yeah, were there any teachers or anyone of influence in your life that recognized the storytelling gene?
Absolutely, and I'm so lucky and so pleased to acknowledge them. I went to school in Evanston, Illinois in the 50s. It was an extremely good public school system, and almost every year I was noted for this gift I seemed to have. I was praised for it. I was singled out for it. I was encouraged. I was told I had to stick with it, and that all things might be possible if I stuck with it. And it makes me, I hope that talent scouting apparatus hasn't left American education. I really do, because that was so important to me. I was lousy. I was a miserable child. I was a bad athlete. I was weak. I was puny. I cried too much. I just was I was lazy. I just was not at all an impressive child. But I had this one thing, and I knew it, and after a while, I believed it, and even after a little bit longer, I began to identify and project as a writer, and I literally have wanted to be some form of writer since I was 8 years old. So and that was because teachers noted me and selected me and encouraged me, and that continued all the way through to college. Every year I had a teacher who would champion me, and I was lucky. I was so lucky to have that in my background. I mean, it could have happened that nobody ever said a thing, and I don't know what I'd be doing today if nobody had ever said a thing.
Well, we talk a lot about the dark and lonely days of being a writer, because a lot of times you're in a room by yourself and you're making up stories that no one's going to see for months or years down the road, and discouragement can easily creep in. And we always go back to those little nuggets of encouragement from a teacher, from a parent, whatever, and I just really like to highlight those and to hear other people's stories, because those are the real champions in society.
Yes, they are. And I think they're absolutely necessary for anyone who is hoping. That, another thing that's very, very helpful is to grow up in a house full of books and to have books everywhere. I don't know if that's still the case in America, but I grew up in a house that was crammed with books. And I just, having those, this is, decades before the internet. The books were our internet, and just having access to that was enormously helpful and enormously encouraging and enormously important.
Right. Stephen, before Bob Lee Swagger was born in your imagination, or maybe he precedes this, but you had another life as a distinguished and decorated journalist. What drew you to journalism?
Well, it wasn't really journalism, it was film criticism. I wanted to be a film critic from the first moment I found out what a film critic was. And it seemed to be the ideal combination of my talents, and that I knew and loved movies, but at the same time, I understood that I didn't have any leadership or executive or snoozing or manipulative abilities that would make a living in the movie industry really right for me. And at the same time, I felt that I had a gift for writing, and so I got both I was able to indulge in my movie love. At the same time, I was able to express my whatever ability I had been given. And that was extremely, it was an ideal job for me. It wasn't easy to get. The jobs are very hard to get. They're even harder now. But I played my cards right, and I got some breaks. And it was I guess I was a movie critic for 28 years, and there were 28 very good years. And then at a certain point, I understood that the movies were changing, and that I had changed, and that the stories that they were telling weren't that interesting to me. And I didn't feel like making the discriminations. The other thing that happened was I lost my movie memory. It used to be that I saw a movie, it was entered on my hard drive, my inner hard drive. I could always recall it, and I could perform prodigious feats of memory based on movies I had once seen. Maybe I had only seen a part of them, but I could still recall them and their past and their production crews and all of that stuff. But at a certain point, either that got full or I lost the ability to concentrate. And suddenly, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any of the young directors. All the actors looked exactly the same, both male and female. The stories just seemed really insipid. It seemed mainly to be about giant washing machines invading from space and turning into giant motorcycles. And it just sort of lost my enthusiasm for it. And so I knew when it was time to stop being a movie critic. And essentially, I fired myself. I mean, the Post couldn't fire me, but I knew that it was time to move on and do something else. Unfortunately, a buyout offer came along exactly at the right time, and I was able to leave that industry while the leaving was good.
I feel like, Stephen, that we've lost the purpose of true criticism, and I feel like in the minds of the buying public, criticism has turned into what we think of as like Amazon reviews, and I think it's very important that people should be able to weigh in and share their experience that they had with a book or with a movie, or I think that's extremely valid and needed. But there's also, a valid place for people to perform true criticism. Can you just explain for a moment what the difference is in those things?
Well, the first is the Amazon criticism is unfiltered, unedited, spontaneous, usually based on some powerful emotional reaction, positive or negative to something. And I agree with you that it's a wonderful outlet. I think it's good. I believe in the democratization of information and expression. On the other hand, I do miss the voice of the senior critics. And it seems like I don't care for nearly anybody who's writing today. It seems like it's mostly it's like a young NKVD commissar checking for political incorrectness in the Minsk sub-district of 1934, and then some plot synopsis thrown in. And the only guy that I read regularly, nobody is really that good a writer. The one good writer that I read is Anthony Lane in the New Yorker, who always amuses me. But no one else is. I mean, Pauline Kael, among other things, is a wonderful writer. And even if you didn't agree with her, you found her views stimulating, you found her language vigorous, you found her argument quite interesting, and that sort of that dimension of informed criticism and the voice of the critic, of the senior critic, that is also it's just vanished largely, and I do miss that.
The new book, Game of Snipers, is the 11th book in the Bob Lee Swagger series. Where did the character of Swagger come from?
At a certain point in my career, I had decided to write a assassination book. And the reason was that it was very easy to manage. It would have a limited cast of characters. It would be very clear on good and bad. It would be very fast-moving. It would be very, in a sense, I'd sort of gotten away from that kind of book which I had written at my first book, The Master Sniper. I wanted to get back to that book. And I thought maybe this time I would make the sniper the hero instead of the bad guy. And I had just read Charles Henderson's biography of Carlos Hathcock called Marine Sniper. He was a leading Marine sniper in Vietnam. And although there were aspects of that book that I felt were fictionalized, I still was very moved by the figure. And so I decided to try and tell a story about a sniper. It caught up in a conspiracy, and with long distance shooting, I wanted to portray that correctly for the first time. And it took a long time to write. It took 4 years to write. I gave up on it several times. At one point, I cut almost 300 pages out of it. It wasn't very good until the very end, when I made some changes. I broke one character into two characters. At that point, it suddenly got really interesting, and that became a point of impact. A very smart editor at Bantam named Barbara Harris stuck with me through the whole period. She was a superb editor. She was the editor at the Thornbirds, so she really knew how novels should proceed. And she, at one point, she'd sent me letter after letter of editorial commentary, which was much better than my book. And I thought that maybe my book would be a footnote in the masterpiece called The Editorial Commentary of Barbara Harris. But eventually the book got good enough, and to this day, people still love it. And to this day, I encounter people who say, well, it's never really topped Point of Impact. Too bad. Boy, he burned out, and it's just, I can't, I love having written that book. And I'm not, believe me, I'm not bitter, but it's kind of funny that so many people just won't, aren't interested in anything else because they like that book so much. And the other thing about that that's interesting is, if you ask me why that book was so much better than all the other books, I really can't tell you. I mean, I don't even know if it was, but it seems to be that many people believe it was. And what makes, within one author's work, one book better than another book, I still, all these years into it, I have no idea. I just don't know. They all seem pretty good to me. I know where they're weak. I know what's wrong with them. But they were the best book I could write in that year under those circumstances, and that'll have to be what it is. So, that's just essentially, in a nutshell, actually a rather big nutshell, the story of my career.
I love it. In writing 11 novels with Bob Lee Swagger, we have followed him through all kinds of changes and circumstances and world events, and from conspiracies, and now in the new book, Game of Snipers, we see a kind of turning of the tables, and Swagger gets to see another side of his profession, if you will. What have been some of the challenges in writing a book or a series with a character like Swagger, and with the world changing around him the way that it's changing around us?
Well, I made a decision, and it wasn't even really a decision. It was just a reality to keep him my age. So I'm not one of these pro authors who has an eternal 35-year-old at the center of his opus. He is aged with me. He's in better shape than I am, but there's no ache and pain that he feels that I haven't felt. I believe me, I know what a 73-year-old body looks and feels like, and I think I have to stay grounded in that reality, or I might lose contact with him. I don't know. I just have a suspicion. Now, I suspect I can make some money if I offered someone in New York a 35-year-old Bob Swagger. But I have no idea what a 35-year-old man feels like. It's all very hazy to me, and I have no interest in doing that. And it's just one of the things I tried to do, and you seem to get this, and some of the other people I've spoken to seem to get this, which is very pleasing to me, is that I've tried to make. I don't want to be a professional author. I don't want to look at the marketplace and see what's current this year and, sort of try and write to keep that in mind and to push the latest and hot buttons. I've always let Bob sort of go where he wants to go. And, for example, one of the books, The 47th Samurai, it's really not even an American thriller. It's a Japanese samurai movie. And several people have pointed out that it violates several of the rules of American thrillers. And they're damn right it does, because it's not an American thriller. It's a Japanese samurai movie. And it's perfect. It's a perfect Japanese samurai movie. And if that's the lens through which you observe it, you see how brilliant it is. Anyway, I've sort of indulged myself in doing what I wanted. But I've always, as I said, I've stayed grounded in the reality of the man of that age going through those things. And I've sort of forced him through my imagination, and willy or nilly that admits or permits the real world to sneak in. Someone said to me, I love your books because you've always got Burger Kings and IHOPs and McDonald's and Walmarts. And nobody else does that. And I never even thought about it. It's just that the America I'm in has those things, and it would never, if you give directions, you say, go up to the IHOP, turn left until McDonald's, and it's right around the corner from McDonald's. And it would never occur to me to do it any other way. It's just that accidental reality that seems to work for my process, and that I hope, and there seems to be some evidence that pleases readers.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you ask me a question, and I somehow launch off in another direction.
That's perfect.
I have no idea. The truth is, I can't even remember what the question is. Did I answer it? Was that the question?
You did. Perfectly.
Okay.
There's a character in this new book, Game of Snipers, and she has done meticulous research and to the point of obsession. And she, enlists Bob. How do you go about research for a new book, and to get all the meticulous details that you bring out in the book to get those right?
Well, I have a natural gift. Gift is too pompous a word, but I do have what would be called a good gun mind, meaning that I remember stuff. That movie hard drive got filled up, but my gun mind is still very active, and I remember stuff. If I don't have to study it, it just sticks. And so when I write about the guns, if I don't know it, I know where to go to find it. I know the culture, I know the websites, I know the people who can talk to me about the stuff. So it's not like I'm coming excuse me, it's not like I'm coming in from the cold. I'm building on information that I've accrued over decades. And so in that respect, it's not even really a challenge. What it is, it's a lot of fun. The issue I had with this book was if you're doing a manhunt, one of the things you have to keep coming up with is clues for the manhunters to uncover that will suggest a change in their course of action in order to intercept the man that they're hunting. I found that I'd never really done that, or at least I hadn't done it since the Master Sniper, 40 years ago. And I found that really challenging, and I was aware that I used some of the same gimmicks twice because there weren't as many gimmicks. I couldn't come up, I needed 12 gimmicks, but I could only come up with 10 gimmicks. So I used two of the gimmicks twice to get the 12. And at one point for example, I overused photo interpretation. And at one point I was laughing with my friends that I was going to call it Game of Snipers, a novel of photo interpretation. And that'll be real commercial, Steve. But at least I tried to disguise the second time through, or to make it more sophisticated, so it didn't seem the same thing. No book is perfect. I wish I could have come up with two new things, but this is the best book I can write in the year that I wrote this one. So there you have it.
Well, and what a fantastic book it is. The new book, Game of Snipers, is when you're hearing this, it will be out available everywhere, in audiobook, Kindle edition, and hardcover. Stephen, this has been so much fun talking with you. I love the book. I love what you're doing. Is there a place where people can find you online to dig into your back catalog? And no. All right.
No, if you want old books, there are a lot of mystery stores that will sell you old books that only sell mysteries. You can't. I mean, I think that big chain books also keep a pretty good backlog. But if you really want stuff from a long time ago, go to the Poison Pen in Prescott, Arizona, or the Mysterious Bookstore in New York, or there's a great one in Houston. I'm actually going to be there. I think it's Mysteries to Die For. And those guys, their job, what they do so well, is they keep the traditions alive, and they keep the old books alive. And they'll help you find the stuff. As far as me online, I do have a rather tepid Facebook page. I'm not a Facebook guy. I had a website for a while that someone ran for me, but then he got bored, and so now it's just frozen in the year 2004. Not exactly state of the art, believe me. I had to do something about that, and I think that Putnam is the publisher. If you go to their website, they'll find some way to lead you to the world. I think that one of the other oddities of my career is I've had so many different publishers over the years with the same characters. I mean, I'm the only man in America who wrote a trilogy in which all three books were published by different publishers. That's the kind of sort of chaos and sloppiness that characterizes my professional life. Maybe someday somebody will make some sense of it, but I've just been too busy having fun to pay much attention to the details.
Which is the best plan. The new book, Game of Snipers, out available everywhere now. There's a link to it in the show notes of this episode. Thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Author Stories podcast. Be sure to subscribe at hankgarner.com or on your favorite podcasting app. Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series.
Midnight struck. The Sandman had come. A few faint notes drifted through the rooms of 417 Gorybrook. The hollow wind testing the weatherproofing, the weak scritch of the persimmon tree against Zeph's window, and the drone of Hedwig's snoring. The old house shifted, creaked, and the shade of Agatha Van Brunt descended from the attic. "Brom?" she called. The ghost paused, collecting herself on the stair. She passed a mirror, but the glass remained empty, reflecting only absence. Agatha would not have recognized herself anyway. She had been beautiful long ago, and still was in her own mind. Not a toothless and wizened spectre. Not a blue chalk sketch of a hag half erased from the blackboard of night. She drifted into the master bedroom, disappeared into a shaft of moonbeams, and reappeared on the other side. She stood over Hedwig, listening to him snore. But Hedwig was not Brom. She needed Brom. She slipped through the floor into Zeph's bedroom. She stood over him for a long time, listening to the persimmon tree's weak coffin scratch on the window screen. Brom? No, this was not Brom her son. But she loved this boy. So much hidden potential. He reminded her of Dylan, her grandson. Dylan had slept in this room many, many times. But Dylan was dead, never to return. This boy, Zeph, was alive. So alive. Oh, would that he might remain so forever. Look at him. Who would consign such a handsome lad to the rot of death? Only a very cruel and blind God. Agatha brushed her spectral lips to Zeph's cheek. He stirred, scratched the spot, and rolled into his pillow. But Zeph was not Brom. Where
Oh, Brom is dead.
She remembered now.
Brom is dead, and so are Hermanus, my husband, and Hans, my brother, and old Baltus Van Tassel, and Katrina, all dead. Only old Agatha remains, after a fashion, to trouble the world.
Her sense of herself sharpened and returned to her. She searched the rooms for the Crane boy. She sensed him. Yes, here was the boy, sleeping fitfully, holding his animal. She extended a hand as if to reach into Jason's chest and take his heart in her talons. The dog woke, sensing Agatha's presence, and growled.
Growl till your voice cracks, cur. I could kill this child myself. I could possess the man or the boy. I could take the butcher knife from the drawer. I could stride through the night in strong male form and dissect this child at my whim.
Something struck her. Something blasted her up and away from the boy. She collected her energies again and tried to re-enter, but could not pass through the walls. When she found her voice, it came as hollow and cold as wind through a tomb.
Who is here?
Agatha whispered, and her tone might have withered grass.
Show yourself.
She waited with growing confusion and anxiety. She threw herself forward and battered the door like a tempest.
Who is here?
She cried. But no one answered.